Yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Level 30 podcast. My name is Tom, and if you're watching the video, you can see the sad news I'm going to say, and if you're listening to our audio podcast, which we very much appreciate, we have to tell you the bad news, and that is we're down one of the Level 30 crew today. Kevin is not able to join us.
And we miss him so much.
No, we don't. But we do, kind of. I reacted way too quick there. No, we do miss Kevin. He had some last minute stuff pop up and just couldn't dedicate the time. And
He's actually stuck in Pokemon right now. He
hates it. As all Level 30 viewers know, time is the one thing that we just never seem to have enough of. But I am sitting down here with Joe today. So we're like, we don't need a third person. We can do this on our own. And please tell us if we did this on our own.
We already did a whole podcast before the podcast, so you guys are getting the leftovers here.
Yeah, there might be like a bonus banter scene we'll just release when it's just us singing and making inappropriate jokes.
It's the B-side.
Yes, I like it. I like the B-side. Well, Joe, how are we doing? How are you doing today or this week or since we last chatted? Which is a really bad question because we chat every day, but we haven't chatted formally in a podcast in like a month.
When was the last time we talked in front of a camera? I'm not sure. Well, as far as everyone else is concerned, I'm doing okay. How are you doing, Tom?
I'm doing well.
That's good.
I'm running into the stockpile of games that I really want to play that I can't find time to play.
And that's the definition of this entire channel.
Yes, it is. And they just keep coming out, and I just keep buying them, and they keep sitting on my shelf, which will hopefully at the very least turn into collector's items. As I was able to send out a picture, someone was talking about the game Last Story, which was one of the like Operation Rayfall games that came out on the Wii. And I had to choose between that or what's the Chronicles? Oh my God. The one with Shulk. I'm drawing a blank on it. Xenoblade. Oh, there it is. And I was like, well, The Last Story has really cool packaging. And so I bought that one instead. And I've never opened it, but I put it like a picture on the forum and I got a couple people that were like, dude, let me buy that off you. And I was like, ooh, we're going to wait on this one. Because it's the only platform it's on. It's a really good game, and I've never played it, so I wouldn't know that. But anyway, that was a really long-winded story that didn't need to happen. Thank you for checking out our podcast, being here today. We got a bunch of stuff on the menu, but as you can tell by what I think is a really sharp shirt, our main topic of conversation today is going to be the release of Pokemon Sword and Shield. Oh, wait, the game's in front of you. For the video folks, it's on the counter, on display. I couldn't fit my Pokemon plushies on the desk in a presentable, professional way, so they stayed home.
And my hoodie shows off Kevin's opinion on Pokemon very, very brightly.
Very gray, slate,
droll,
no opinion whatsoever.
Yeah.
No, Kevin is not here because we're talking about Pokemon, although he wouldn't have much to say. He did say adamantly...
He might have a lot to say, despite not playing it.
He was taking this version off. I don't know how much of a fan he is. And admittedly,
well, the first one, maybe two, I think the first podcast and a half, we had a ton of Pokemon stuff up here, and it was all Kevin's.
They were Amiibo, and I think he brought them.
There were more than just Amiibo, though.
Oh, okay.
There were a couple other things.
I know he brought the Amiibo he cares less about to his classroom, because the ones he really likes are at home.
Point is, he clearly cares about Pokemon a lot, because we decorated the entire table with his Pokemon stuff.
And we've had less and less decoration since.
This is all we need now.
But real quick, before we get into some Pokemon's stuff, I just wanted to make sure everyone's aware of our recent videos up on our YouTube channel. If you haven't checked out Press Start, Mike and I have revisited, and we haven't changed much from a formula standpoint, but I want to say thank you to all the people that have checked out those videos. They've been doing a lot better on the analytical side, which is very excellent. And we have a whole slate of games episodes we're going to put out between now, next week-ish, Thanksgiving weekend, and the end of the year, which is really cool. Ada and I were also able to try and logistically figure out a way to do the Level 30 News Minute, which was really exciting because that was a segment that we both really liked doing, and it got good reception. But it logistically, from a production standpoint, became so much of a hassle to actually put together that it just became a show we had to drop. So we tinkered with kind of like, oh, we'll just see if this works. And it happened to work. So we put it out there. And I'm hoping that we're able to do another episode soon. Ada is also taking some personal time off from an injury she she
Sustained.
sustained. That's it. That's the word. So hopefully she'll be ready to go on camera for you again soon, because that was a really cool endeavor. So check those out. We got some more stuff coming between now and the end of the year. Pretty light on the review stuff, but we're gonna have some end of the year, game of the year type discussions. And I'll probably do my top 5 games of the year. We'll see if anyone else wants to do their top 5 games of the year.
Do a collective top 5 games, like
I
level
would be really
30s.
like, I made my list.
Not even top 5, the top level 30 gamer games. You know, what are the best games for you guys to pick out of this year for your busy schedule?
Ooh, that's a good idea.
I know.
All right, I'm gonna mark the timestamp it, lap it. That might be a good one to revisit, because I play a bunch of stuff both on Xbox and PlayStation as well, and so I always like to include those in my Game of the Year decision. And we're gonna talk a little bit about the Game Award nominations as well, because most of those games are games that are not on a Nintendo platform. So recently, Pokemon Sword and Shield came out, and I would argue that you probably heard about that, whether you're interested in the game or not, as there was a lot of hoopla.
Well, if they started from scratch on this podcast, they've heard about it, but I'm just saying we talked about it already. All right, you know what? So point is, the game came out.
The game came out, and there was a lot of hubbub about it. That's right, you get hubbub and hoopla in the same podcast. Prior to the game's release, because there were some complaints from some very avid fans that were not thrilled that not every Pokemon was to be included in the game, since Pokemon was created like 2 decades ago. Where are we? Almost at 30 years.
I guess we're not quite at 30 years yet, because I was like 6 or 7ish when it came out. I had to have been, and I'm 29 now.
It came out in 96?
Maybe I was a little younger.
Well, I think it came out in
No,
Japan
it
in
still would've been-
96. I think
okay,
it came
it
over
would've come out a
here
little later here.
97.
Yeah.
Because it was red and green in Japan. It was blue and red here. Yeah, but we're getting up there. So needless to say, and this is one of the really cool things I think is just incredible about this franchise, is that we're continuously talking about this game that, if you are a fan of the game, or you've played a game in the series, or all the games in the series, or a few games in the series, that arguably, I mean, this game's been around since we were like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, and we still get to revisit it in a meaningful and arguably different way, which is part of the contention around the game.
They're still pushing new stuff, and even if you want to make the argument that the game on a whole has gotten stale, there's still new stuff to be excited for every time, even if it's not quite as exciting as the last generation, and we won't get into that at the very moment. But it's still, the game's still happening. It's still new. It's not the same exact game every single year, you know, with just slightly updated graphics. I mean, even
Or is it exactly that?
Even Sun and Moon to now, and I have my own opinions on Sun and Moon, and granted Sun and Moon were a big graphical upgrade more than anything else over the games. The graphical upgrade from Sun and Moon to Sword and Shield is enormous.
well,
and granted, it's another platform,
Yes.
but it does a whole lot for the game on a whole, considering it's, you know, an RPG and an adventure game. You want a big open space so you can adventure, and it does a lot for the game, and I think that alone is something for people who are at least fans of the series to look forward to.
Yeah, that was one of the early complaints too, that the game didn't look like it was the graphical leap of an improvement that everyone was hoping it would be. And I think
the scale is a lot bigger than the actual graphical improvement.
I think the scale of the world is definitely bigger. The scale of the Pokédex is not. There's like 200 plus, I believe, in this game.
Isn't it 4?
Take a look. You can look while I ramble a little bit. But I definitely think, and Game Freak and the Pokemon Company have always tended to stick to older versions of hardware because the install base was there. But I also think from a development standpoint that it was easier to reuse some of those assets that they've used in previous games. Again, another argument with this game is that it was reusing animations and character models and stuff. And Joe looked that up. It was 400 Pokemon in Sword and Shield. And so I think the anticipation of what it was going to be on a dedicated, arguably home console, was a little bit higher than what Game Freak would traditionally do. I think if you sit back and reflect on really what you should have expected was it's going to look a little bit better. Obviously, I think everyone that had both a Switch and a 3DS never went back to their 3DS because, man, that screen resolution was awful. I mean, it was like sub 420 or 480p. It was bad. So like playing games on that when you had the Switch now was just, actually was very difficult to go back.
It is 800 by 240.
Oh.
That is the 3D. The top screen is 800 by 240. The bottom screen is 320 by 240. I'm actually kind of impressed that it does look as good as it does on a resolution that terrible.
Yeah, I mean, it's terrible. But
It's
I think
really
it also
bad.
then, it kind of forced you to say, all right, let's look at art direction a little bit more seriously as opposed to just being a graphical power horse.
But they did some really cool stuff with it. Like, I'm kind of impressed. There was I forget which, but there was a Final Fantasy game that I kind of loaded up recently on DS, and it wasn't even on 3DS, it was just on DS, and like it uses some like weird video codec.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look great, but it's passable on a DS screen.
Yeah, if you didn't know the
resolution
resolution was that low from like a spec standpoint, you probably wouldn't think about it. But it's
like I wasn't
pretty
expecting
terrible.
720, but I was expecting more than what it is. That is pretty impressive.
Definitely not. And so with Sword and Shield, the fan base became very irate very quickly, which agitated me as someone who works in a creative endeavor, that people were ripping this game apart piece by piece, not having actually played it, because the previews were
Not even having demoed it, like having no ability to put themselves into the game at all whatsoever.
right. And so despite the fact that early build previews were generally very positive, and then even the early reviews that came out on I think it was, I don't know what the embargo was on it, but reviews came out very close to launch date, either day before or like midnight the night before, whatever, were genuinely very positive.
Yeah, honestly, when the game came out, I didn't see a lot of bad reviews, which was surprising because to me, everything anybody had to say about it was terrible. They're doing so much, terrible stuff about the game, and they're not putting a lot of effort into it. And then all the reviews came out, and they were like, they didn't even have any regard to the things that people were concerned about. It was just, this is genuinely a very good game. By the way, this is reviews opinions on it that we've seen so far. This has nothing to do with my own opinions.
Yes,
but
which I want to get into.
The reviews were absolutely saying this is a great game, and that was kind of all they had to say about it. Like, there's some problems. There's not all the Pokemon that we would have hoped, but like glowing reviews from headlines.
Yeah,
down.
it does a lot of stuff, and we'll talk about our initial impressions in a sec. But it's 82 on Metacritic. It's got 31 positive reviews, 7 mixed from the critics. And then we jump over to the user stuff, and this is where I think some of the angriest people are going to shout the loudest. Over 1,200 negative reviews.
But where are those 1,200 negative reviews coming from? Are they like straight up from Metacritic, or
it looks like it. I'm not really sure how Metacritic works, but yeah, the user score is a 4.0. And I as an artist, and I would say, and you're a musician, so like we both work in this medium where we're being creative and putting ourselves out there in creative works for people to consume, right? Whether it's a songwriter performance you do or a video we throw up on our YouTube channel, right? Like people are open to critique that, but saying like, oh, your song sucks after you play it, our video dislike, bad comment after we put it up there is fine because you've had an opportunity to consume that. But I'm curious of how many of those like personal postings came out before that game even launched.
Yeah, I mean, my I guess analogy to it would be, can you take a band's album, look at the track names, and look at the track names and look at the instruments that they used on it, and say, this probably isn't going to be a good album because, my favorite punk band used banjo on an album and they don't typically do that.
First of
you
all,
have no
awesome.
idea what's coming. That's really cool.
So let's use the Pokemon logic there then. If your latest album doesn't include every track from every album that you've previously recorded, then yes, I am going to be angry because, that's the same logic, right?
Not entirely, because every Pokemon game before it has included every Pokemon, but has every album I've ever put out included all of the songs from every album before that?
I'm just applying the logic that people are mad for. You know what, Joe? It was close enough, and you had to go that extra step.
I sure did.
That's okay. Which, you know what? I'm just going to just blanket that statement and say if you're in that camp of people that were angry and are choosing not to purchase this game, then you have every right to do so. I think you're missing out on a pretty fun adventure so far.
So then, since we're headed that direction, give off your impressions on it.
No, I would like you to give off your impressions.
Start with mine.
Yeah, I want to
Okay.
start with yours because if you haven't seen, small plug, I did put up an impressions video after I spent a couple hours with the game. And then, of course, I lent that game to Joe so that he can get his impressions for this very podcast. So you can check out my video on YouTube if you want to hear my impressions in like 3 minutes. And we'll get into them here in a little bit deeper context. But I figured we'd start with your impressions, Joe.
Okay. Well, you put more time into the game than I did, so take mine with a grain of salt. I didn't get that far into the
Well,
game.
we're both
but-
within the first. Like I think I just clipped 5.5 hours.
Okay, so you're still a few hours ahead of me, but not by a whole lot.
Right.
I probably 3 to 3.5 hours. So again, not that far into the game. My initial impressions are, I think it's honestly a slow start. I know you disagreed with that.
I did disagree,
but I think
yeah.
the start's a little slow. I don't the way the story works itself out and how you get your first Pokemon. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. The characters aren't. They're fleshed out very quickly. I will say that they're absolutely built their personalities very fast.
Yeah.
I'm just not a huge fan of the characters themselves. They bug me a little bit. Like, I don't hate Hop as much as the rest of the internet community seems to hate Hop, but I also don't like Hop. Like, I just don't have any love for him. If he were to just stop following me on my adventure, I'd be fine with that.
Well, so the traditional setup for Pokemon for the uninitiated or those that don't play the game is that early on in the game to kind of teach you the mechanics of like a battle and like how to catch a Pokemon, you would kind of frequently be introduced to your rival. And your rival is a character that once you select your Pokemon, you can battle against, and they kind of walk you through that first battle. And the professor comes in and says, "Oh, you took a hit. Here's a potion, and you can apply that and all this other stuff." So it kind of gives you, it's like that RPG for, it's a kid's game, so they might not know deeper RPG mechanics. But what I think is interesting with this version, and maybe those that have played a lot of Pokemons can agree to this, he's your rival in name only, which is kind of weird because I remember the earlier games being like, this guy's your rival, and their attitude was very much like, well, I'm going to be better than you, so like, suck it. And you kind of constantly always played catch up, it felt, to this person. They were always one step ahead of you. And this one, they're like, oh, well, it's good to have a rival, so you have someone to like challenge yourself and like make yourself grow and be better, which I think is a good life lesson. But it takes the starch out of like, oh, I really want to just cream this guy into the ground.
Sun and Moon was the same way though. Like,
okay, and I played that for a little bit, but I vaguely remember.
It's pretty similar where I forget his name, but he follows you throughout the game. Like you're on a journey together, and you'll do like a trial or whatever it is, and then they're kind of like, well, we should battle and see how we're doing, but realistically you're not trying to beat him for the entire game. He's more like, I wish I could beat you, but you're very good at what you do, and that's that. But overall, you're just journeying through the game together and through your whole story together, and he's just kind of along with you, and he wants to battle here and then, which is how it seems like Hop's going to be. Hop also seems like he wants to be better than you, and he's like, well, my brother is the champion, so I'm going to be better than you, but he's not as snarky about it.
No, he's not as snarky.
It's like, oh, you beat me, I've got to do what I can to get better, but I will beat you. And it kind of stops there.
Yeah, he doesn't get like mean or nasty about it. And I always felt there was like, even in the original anime, the cartoon, your rival was kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
And he was smug and arrogant. And like, I think that played into wanting like to drive you to be better. But I guess maybe now in our culture, it's like you can be better through positive reinforcement, kind of. I don't know.
I understand what they're doing and what they're going for, and they're trying to give it a more lighthearted feel and appeal to younger kids in a much more lighthearted way, which I can appreciate.
Yeah, but Sun and Moon also allowed you to give a name to your rival. This one doesn't, which I think is just kind of a weird, like, that should be a simple thing.
That's true. That might be the first game that it doesn't let you.
And I remember people commenting on that in Sun and Moon and saying like, oh, your rival's kind of friendly, so like give him a really friendly name. Something that like, when you have that coworker that's just really nice to you and you're just like, you kind of hate them because they're so nice, like that's the kind of name you want to get. Like I named mine, I think Devin, based off of the character that was fired in season 2 of The Office instead of Creed. But like, became one of those things where you'd be like, oh, that was a good battle. Here's some potions. See ya. And I'd be like, oh, I freaking hate you, Devin. Like you just had a name you can roll off the tongue like that. Hop just seems full of energy, and I don't know if I'm into him as a character as much. But again, he's a catalyst to just like, he kind of weaves through your adventure, and he's obviously not the sole purpose of it.
Yeah, but he's leading you through too, because he seems to know where to go. Because I mean, you're taking on the role of somebody else, so you don't know the world. Maybe your character does.
That's true.
But
that's actually a good point.
But Hop, he's digital, but he lives here. He's in this world, so he can lead you.
Good point.
He's your guide.
Yes, he gives you that guidance. He's your Navi. He points you like, oh, we'll see you in this town, and then like kind of says, take this route to get there, and then he runs off, and of course you meet him there eventually. Yeah.
Speaking of guides, one thing I like about the game too is that when you open up the menu, it tells you what your next objective is.
Yes.
Like, maybe not exactly how to get there, but you're always within a couple steps of it anyway. Like at one point, like I closed the game and came back to it the next day, and I'm just standing in a house and was like, I don't know what I was doing yesterday. And then I just opened up the menu and it was like, time to battle Hop again. I'm like, oh, okay, I know what's coming. And I walked out the door and Hop was standing there.
Right.
So I knew what happened.
Which is great because these games are some of the few games that while I might put down for a while, I will get an itch to go, you know what? I just feel like playing Pokemon. And like I'll get back into it for a little while. So I could play this in spurts, which is why I think it's a good game. But coming back to it going like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. And the maps are never really truly helpful because they're like, you're in this town. You need to go to this town. But the map doesn't tell you, at least I don't believe, like if you hover over the next town, it might not tell you what it is. So there's like 3 ways to go. And you're like, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was nice that it does kind of give you that objective, which a lot of quality of life improvements in this one.
My big complaint about the game, though, is, and it's really not a big deal, but I got to say that the quality of life improvements are everything like people have been asking for out of Pokemon games forever.
Yes.
Just simplifying the menu and not losing your items and separating bags, and the menu screen, like when you go to throw a Pokeball in a battle, looks fantastic. Like it all looks really nice. Like the game is put together very well in that sense. But as far as actual gameplay polish goes, I'm seeing a couple little things that I'm afraid are just going to get worse as the game goes on. And
what?
It's never going to be game breaking, and it's never going to be anything that it's total polish. Like it's nothing that's going to make the game any easier or more difficult in the end. It's like the dumbest thing, and it just comes off as sloppy to me, and that's why I notice it. If you run into a wall, you run up to it, and it goes boom.
There's a sound.
Yeah.
Bugged the hell out of me in the first like 30 seconds because
even the first Pokemon game did that. And there's no problem with that. My problem is if you're standing still in front of a wall and you just tap forward, he doesn't move, but the game goes boom again. And it comes off as sloppy because to me, in my mind, understanding the programming of it just kind of looks like, oh, well, when collision happens, make the boom noise, and just do that for every collision whenever it happens.
I found that a little irritating.
Yeah, they didn't qualify when, what kind of collision, what kind of, inertia is behind the collision. And are they going to do that for the rest of the game? Is there going to be a lot of like, here's how we fix this problem, here's how we fix the problem of people running into walls, you make a noise, is there going to be actual polish to it, and one thing that shows that polish too, there was a video, and they've done this in every single Pokemon game, and it's just like a staple of the Pokemon aesthetic, but there's no reason for it to happen. There's a character that turns, and what they did was instead of making him turn like an actual like anthropomorphic,
like the whole model just rotates without the feet moving?
Well, his feet move, but
but
he pivots on like a central point,
Yeah.
like he just spins in place while his feet are moving. And like, all right, that worked in, generation 1, 2, 3, and even 4 when you didn't have the ability to make models that actually like bent and were polygonal. But this is a high-end, like decent modern system that can do that. And one of their excuses for cutting Pokemon was, we're going to work on the models. And they clearly didn't do that in this specific case,
well,
with that loss of polish there. And
but I think that's more of the
me.
animation and the actual models themselves. I think the character models look really nice.
Oh, yeah,
the
they
characters
do.
themselves are really cool. And I like the customization options for clothing and hair and stuff. And even the Pokemon models, like every time, especially early in the game, you're like, who's it going to be? Or if they're running around in the field, you can kind of see, but not really see a lot of detail. Like, I think they've looked really good so far. There's only been 1 or 2 where, like, it's a brand new Pokemon I'm seeing for the first time, and I go, that's, that doesn't look, like, I'm not less interested in it.
Yeah, well, don't be wrong, the models look great. It's just, I mean, what good are the models if the animations on them don't look good? Like, they're all going to be stationary for them to look good, and that kind of sucks. You can actually see it very early in the game if anybody's interested in keeping an eye out for it and they want me to, ruin the game for them. When you select your starter Pokemon, you select yours, Hop selects his, and then the Pokemon that you guys don't pick gets very sad and looks back and forth.
Oh, yeah.
And you can see them pivot on that center point rather than moving and looking back and forth.
Right.
They just They it's almost like they're on a peg and they just turn on a peg like a music box or something.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I noticed that as well.
Don't look for it. You're going to ruin your time like I did.
Well, I mean, I think if you're looking that closely at stuff, I think that's one of those things that you just accept and kind of go, this is the style they've always had, so it's kind of in line with what they've done traditionally, and that maybe that's part of the charm. I don't know. Like when Let's Go came out and people are like, oh, look, a full-grown Bulbasaur. God, what's the grass one? Starter? Jesus. Ivysaur?
Venusaur is the final form.
Yeah, okay. Well, Venusaur was like hopping along your character, and they're like,
yeah.
oh wow, I never actually saw him move, and now that I see it, it's kind of weird because you never really like thought about that. You've always seen the little sprite in the game, and that's been it. So I don't know. That hasn't bothered me as much.
And don't get me wrong, it doesn't ruin the game, it doesn't break the game, it doesn't affect the game. It just affects the polish and the quality of the game, and it makes me wonder how the rest of the game is going to play out, and if that's going to continue to happen. And
Probably.
is it going to be a less aesthetically pleasing game? And does that ruin from the actual fun of the game when it looks kind of silly?
I never think aesthetically. I think a game looks the way it looks, and you accept that at the beginning, and you move on to it. Like I don't think over time I'm going to go, ugh, I'm really annoyed with that animation. Right, like that. I don't know if I've ever said that out loud, unless it's like an RPG and there's an attack animation that's like 30 seconds long, and I'm like, I've seen it 1,000 times. Now,
You did say
Pokemon
that.
does do that, but obviously those attack animations are much quicker. And
You did say Score Bunny makes you
Score Bunny
anxious.
makes me anxious. He was the starter that I chose.
I picked him too.
Because I always pick fire types. I know that I might get halfway through this game and not want to grind and kind of stop. So to make the earlier parts of the game easier, I usually go with fire type because some of the first Pokemon you come across in the wild are like normal or grass, and they're usually susceptible to fire. So I have an easier time catching those.
But as we talked about, do not do that in red and blue and yellow.
Yes, because you will fight a rock gym leader
And then a water type who will demolish you.
Yeah.
But anyway, your opinions on it now that we got through mine.
Oh wow, I was kind of chiming in.
We sprinkled.
Overall,
into that.
I really enjoyed it. I'm kind of aching to go back because I think it was a great game that I got into on day one. Was very excited to play. I felt it moved brisker in the start than you did, but I feel like it's a game that I can play way more casually. Not to say that you don't have to be involved, but like Sunday, I really enjoyed just kind of laying on the couch and watching football while having my Switch in front of me and going through Pokemon. And I'm talking to someone, so I will, read that. Or I'm in a battle, so I can kind of, all right, I'm fighting my 12th Squovit, so I'm just going to spam the, Amber attack and move on. And that's, that's cool too. I don't think that means I wasn't paying attention or enjoying it as much, but it's a great game to use to multitask. The phone rings. All right, well, I can pause this and not feel like I'm interrupting my flow of, some games you can't stop flow of battle. You're playing online, like there's no, so like I kind of like that. For me at least, there's no rush to do anything.
Yeah, it's a very, I don't want to call it passive, but it's not an active game when you're playing it. It is very easy to select.
Like you have to do things, obviously.
Yeah, but you hardly ever have to pause the game.
No.
If you need to step away, you can just step away mid-battle.
Right, and Hop will be like, all right, I'll see you in the next town. And I'm like, all right,
And
but
he's
I'm
gone.
gonna capture everything on this route before I get there. And it's just like, I think that's nice that there's no urgency to a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Unless you want to self-impose that on you. But so far I've enjoyed everything. And some of the smaller things like, you get to a cave before you get to your first gym and you have to go through this. So traditionally, because I'm not a good player at all, what I would end up doing is like going into the cave and getting attacked by 12,000 Zubats because that's who was normally in the caves. So enemies are a little bit easier to avoid, but I would end up like having half my stock gone in just getting through those random encounters. And so I'd get part of the way through, I'd go against some trainers, and then I would have to backtrack through the whole thing, out of the tunnel, all the way back to the nearest town, heal my Pokemon, run back. And so I liked in this, at least on the path to the first gym you go to, there's like a girl outside both the entrance and the exit of the cave that are like, yeah, we're kind of running underground illegal Poke stores, so like I'll heal your Pokemon, which is that arguably might make the game easier to some people, but really it's a convenience thing because it saves so much time in having to backtrack much further to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's to me that's a sign that okay, we've listened to people complain about this, and here's kind of a solution that you don't have to use if you don't want to or need to, but it's there to kind of make a lot of the backtracking less laborious, because it was for me at least. So my only concern in having the Pokemon in the open is that while you can avoid those random battles that would happen a lot, my fear is that in order to get to the more interesting parts, that you tend to skip those or avoid them, and now your Pokemon are severely underleveled when you do get to major story beats and you have to face a gym leader and you're like, oh crap, probably shouldn't have avoided every Pokemon on the way. now I got to go back and grind a little bit, because those are my least favorite parts of these types of games, is the grinding.
Yeah, I mean, the pockets of grass are much easier to avoid. So, and they make it so the way they do it is you can, and obviously you know this, so this is for everybody else, but you can like tiptoe through the grass.
Yes.
And that way the Pokemon won't come to you. If you touch them, a battle will start, but they still won't come to you as long as you're like crawling through the grass. If you run through it, they'll notice you and they'll run at you. So if
chase you.
Yeah, so if you're in like a tight pocket of grass, they'll still jump you. Like you'll see an exclamation point pop up and they'll hit you. So it's not. If you're
Well, to
running,
clarify, the exclamation point is still for Pokemon that are hidden. You will still in the grass see Pokemon just walking around.
Oh, yeah,
So the
yeah.
the exclamation point is still that random encounter of we don't know what it's going to be. You have a good idea based on who's around it, but it's not a guarantee. You can get a totally random Pokemon in that.
Yeah.
Which is cool.
And to be completely honest, I like the idea of the random Pokemon roaming around, whether there's random battles or not, because I mean, yeah, it lets you avoid the Pokemon if you want, but it gives you the ability to see, like, oh my God, there's that thing there and I want to catch it.
Yeah.
But it just makes the world feel so much more alive.
Oh,
Like,
absolutely.
it's not an empty world of people where Pokemon just show up. There are now Pokemon living in this world in areas. And it's a little jarring to like whistle and have them like, because you can whistle and have Pokemon run towards you.
Yeah.
It's a little jarring to whistle and have them run to the grass and stop at the edge of the grass like it's some invisible boundary.
Oh,
and
they've chased me out.
I think some of them will. Like I forget his name, the dog, the little corgi.
Oh, something.
Whatever his name is.
the
He'll
cute little
follow
guy.
you out of the grass, 'cause
Hamper, Whimper, Gimper, Harper.
I don't know. He'll follow you out of the grass though. Which
Yeah, well, he's cute. That's fine.
yeah, which is fine with me. I like little corgis, but otherwise, yeah, they'll run to the edge of the grass and just stop. Like I whistled next to like a whole field of Snovers, and they like ran up to it and then stopped. Like I was like in a zoo or something, and they were just looking at me. So, but overall, yeah, it makes the world feel so much more alive that they're just walking around there, and it's cool. The downside of it is that when you get to like the wild area, there are Pokemon that are just standing out there. And like I was like what, like level 7, 8, maybe even 9 when I got there, and I'm looking around. I'm like, there's this giant horse thing, and I'm like, that is cool. I want that. And I ran into a battle, and he was level 37. Yep. Like, what am I gonna do here?
And I think that's just them saying, okay, here are the Pokemon brave enough to say, come at me.
Yeah.
And obviously there seem to be some of the ones that you haven't come across in the game yet. So like I ran up to Onyx, I was like, gimme, and then I got pulverized immediately. And I think it was one of the few times I opted to run out of that battle.
But when the Pokemon are too high of a level, it makes it really difficult to run. So I'm sitting there watching my team just get slaughtered, and it's just saying like, oh, you can't escape. Like, why? He's a rock snake.
Yep, that can breathe fire. No? I don't know how Onyx works. I'm sorry. He just looks cool.
It's a little annoying, but once you realize that happens, you know,
well,
but
I think
like,
that
you expect it.
And I think that's a pretty guaranteed thing that they can bank on. Oh, we're going to put really cool Pokemon just out there, because your instinct is to go, oh my God, I want it.
Yeah.
And then that's when you go, okay, if they're just hanging out there, I'm not ready for it yet, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, and we should say they're not even in the grass.
No, they're like literally chilling.
And the grass is like where all the wild Pokemon are. They're not in the grass, so it's, you know, you kind of look at it and go, well, why aren't you in the grass? I'm going to touch you, and then you realize that you're about to die.
Swamped,
But I mean, that's kind of part of the game. You're learning. You don't want to live and just...
Right. So I think it was a nice way to kind of figure it out without being told directly. Like,
yeah.
If they're out there, be wary.
It's just a matter of like, when I hit level 36, will those guys still be level 36? Or will they be
we
level
are
like 87
perpetually
now?
capped at level 30 contractually because of our channel here. So you can't get above that. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
That's okay.
Well,
I'm glad you brought up the wild area. Do you think the wild area, as far as being the open world area of the game, is enough to satisfy fans that wanted a full-fledged game like that?
I think everybody's expectations are different. And so I think it kind of depends. A lot of people, I think the problem is a lot of people were expecting, Pokemon Breath of the Wild, because we got Zelda Breath of the Wild and it was super open world. And I think that would be awesome, but I think that's a totally different genre of game. It's no longer an RPG. This is a different style of Pokemon game if they do that. But I also don't think people were thinking. They were just like, well, I want a giant open world Pokemon game, and that's that, and didn't realize what the logistics were of making that happen. So, but if those people set that expectation, nobody else officially set that expectation. So it's on them if they decided, like, I'm disappointed by this. But I haven't gone through the whole wild area. I don't know exactly how expansive it is. From the looks of the maps, it looks like it takes up the majority of the Galar region. So I'm going to assume, it's a huge area and it's going to take up a lot. And as long as it's built out well, like I don't care how big it is, as long as it's built out very well, it would satisfy me in my need for a much larger open world game
Right.
rather than a, forest that's just an up and down zigzag like red and blue.
Right. And I think I remember looking at it and I'm like, oh, okay, it's this sectioned off area of the map. And I kept scrolling up the map because the map is very vertical in that sense. And I'm like, do I see any other areas that are kind of coded the same? And it didn't look like it. So I'm like, am I going to have to revisit this area back in the beginning of the game while I'm at the end of the game? And they do make fast travel pretty simple. And I know there's a train that will take you right there. But it didn't look big enough to me compared to what they were saying it was going to be, even though it wasn't a majority of the game. And so I think to what's the word I'm looking for here? To compensate for that maybe is that the type of Pokemon that are usually available are going to be changing depending on the weather and the time of day. Mm-hmm. And so there might be like, okay, there's like 3 or 4 different patterns that you can kind of outline and go, this is when these Pokemon are going to be available to go get, and you just have to make sure you go do that. And that's not, uncommon for hardcore Pokemon players to really map out when certain Pokemon are more likely to be available in the game. Because it can be really specific and crazy. And people that want to catch everything will go out of their way to do that. So I don't know. The more I thought about Breath of the Wild Pokemon, the more I was like, I wouldn't want that because I don't actually think it would be a fun game to play. In that,
I think it would need to be an MMO style game for that to happen.
Breath of the Wild is very open with very little structure and very little narrative, which is one of my big gripes about it.
Yeah, you just go out and play, and you can do anything at any time,
so
sounds cooler than it actually is. And don't get me wrong, I love Breath of the Wild.
I do too, but without that narrative push, it just wasn't quite the same.
Yeah.
So the one game I am playing more of now that I really like, that I actually think would be a better fit and is almost, you could just do a complete palette swap and make it Pokemon, is Dragon Quest XI. The game is open world, but obviously the world itself, there's a pretty set path that you need to go on, and there's some deviations and stuff, but you already have creatures that are out in the world, and a lot of creatures are habitually tethered to one geographic region, and there's boats you can go on. The world is massive, but the narrative kind of weaves you through this in a really interesting and meaningful way, and even backtracks you through some areas through the story, not because like, oh, we'll go here and get this thing or get this person because they're there, but it's part of that overall story. And I think that would be a great template for Pokemon to use, because Pokemon uses its narrative to push you through the game. But if you just took Dragon Quest XI and said, okay, but now you can capture creatures you see and then use them for combat, I think that would be freaking awesome. And that might be a small group of people that have played Dragon Quest XI, and I really encourage it. We'll get to it a little bit later. That's up there for my game of the year, because it's so awesome. Now I know it came out for other platforms years ago, or 1 or 2 years ago, but on Switch it's fantastic. So I guess lastly, and we'll get out of the Pokemon stuff.
Yeah, we were on this a little longer than I thought.
Longer than we wanted. That's okay.
Even without Kevin.
Does this game have some staying power? Do we think this is a game that'll be in the conversation for a while? It's selling very well. I don't think anyone really expected it to not sell well, despite people saying they weren't going to buy it.
It's still Pokemon, though.
Quick numbers. Japan sold over 1.3 million copies in 3 days. And I know that doesn't sound like a lot. I think people look to Japan as a whole and expect the numbers for games to be substantially higher, but they never really are dramatically high, especially compared to the United States. But that's just physical. Digital downloads not included there. Those are really strong numbers in just 3 days in Japan. In Europe, Sword was the best-selling game for the month, I believe, which is interesting because it outsold
Just came out?
Jedi Fallen Order, which came out the same day. But here's the interesting thing. It wasn't just Pokemon outsold Jedi Fallen Order, just Pokemon Sword. So Pokemon Sword was number 1, Fallen Order was 2, and Shield placed 3rd.
Wow.
So then the double pack, which is the 2 games you buy together in one package, placed like 7th. So like it was the 3rd biggest launch in Europe of the year.
Okay.
Behind Call of Duty and FIFA.
Wow.
Call of Duty, which is a yearly game that comes out, and FIFA
yeah.
football being incredibly popular in basically everywhere but America. That's insane. Numbers for the U.S. haven't been released yet, and even Video Game Charts, which is a pretty decent website, only has really games like sales. They don't have 2019 numbers yet.
Okay.
So that's really impressive. So I think, it's going to do gangbusters during the holiday. Hey, it's gotta.
yeah.
I'm
Yeah, I'm
hoping
sure it
they
will.
build on this for next year. Maybe that open area, that the wild area gets a little bit bigger.
Yeah. It might be something that plays a more central role. It's something new to the game, so it could play a more central role, but it could also be completely pulled away because every generation seems to have its own gimmick. And I know, like, as far as Pokemon go, the Dynamax stuff is like the gimmick for Generation
Yeah, and
8.
that was cool and that was fun. It was a little confusing in the wild area where you do it because you go up to the areas and you still have to use your Ycom, which is weird.
Yeah.
It took me a second to figure out.
Basically like a raid battle.
Yeah.
Where you will get demolished the first time you do it.
Not true, because I went into a raid battle and everyone picks their move and you kind of wait, and then it just goes through the moves, and the first move just wiped it out. Oops, I hit the thing. Wiped it out in one hit. So obviously I was with someone that was just over leveled.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I even did one of the surprise trades where you just pick a Pokemon, kind of throws it out there, and if someone goes, all right, I'll trade with this person, here's my Pokemon, you don't know what you're getting. And I felt bad because I put like a level 3 Squovit in there because I had like 3 of them, and I got back like a level 15 evolved Nitpick or whatever the fox is, and I'm like, ooh. But I didn't want to use him because he was so overpowered compared to everyone else.
Yeah.
And his nickname was in Japanese, and you can't change nicknames from traded Pokemon. So I was stuck with a Pokemon I didn't know what to call him. So I was like, all right, we'll put you aside. That's fine. So yeah, this will definitely be a game. I'll be honest, if I get more than halfway through, I'd be impressed. We'll see. Apparently people are beating it if they beeline for the ending in like 20-ish hours, less than.
That's not too bad for if you're beelining. That's not too bad for Pokemon.
No, and someone I read today beat the entire game using only one Wooloo,
I heard about that too,
which is masochistic in my book, but I think they just wanted to do it, which is cool.
Yeah, whatever.
So good. All right, we're gonna put a button or bow or gun
please.
on the Pokemon chat. If it was too long, please tell us in the comments, because I understand this game's not for everyone. But it's obviously one of the bigger releases that's come out soon, and I don't think that the Nintendo has anything on the month of December that's going to be this big.
Not that I'm aware of.
So, which is good, because Kevin yesterday predicts a January Direct. So if you're marking your calendars or taking bets, that's Kevin's. And
Thank you, Kevin.
yeah, let's look to the empty space that is Kevin. Other news, we'll move quickly through some news as
Because honestly,
okay,
there's
Tom.
not a whole lot of news. Like you've
there's
got a lot.
I don't want to say there's no
but
news, because there's always news.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I got a little worried when I was like, oh, it's been so long since we've done a podcast. We're going to be buried in stuff. And there are a few other video game related podcasts I listen to, and all of them have been, because they do like a weekly show. All right, news is a little slow, so they've like built out segments that are normally 5 minutes into 15 minutes, and I'm like, are we in
like
trouble?
we just did?
Kind of, yeah. Well, I think we did our due diligence in talking about a popular game. But thankfully, yesterday, the 2019 Game Awards released their nominee announcement. And I'm just going to run through Game of the Year and then go through some Nintendo representation, because they're a little underrepresented. That's not a word. What? I can't speak.
Underrepresented.
I did say it right.
Yeah.
I'm an idiot. So your 2019 Game Award nominees are, for Game of the Year, Control, Death Stranding, Resident Evil 2, Sekiro: Shadows Die Twice, the only Nintendo rep in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and The Outer Worlds. I don't think Smash Brothers has a chance of winning Game of the Year against these. I would be very surprised, and that's not a knock on Smash Brothers. I love it, but
No, I think the game's great. I mean, it was one of the best selling games of all time. I'd almost be surprised if it didn't win, but I also feel like Nintendo doesn't usually do well in these actual categories.
No, and games are weird, and it's funny because I'm one of the, I don't want to say few people, but the audience for the Academy Awards every year is getting smaller and smaller because most people don't know the movies that are nominated. And so I find it interesting that most of these games are hardcore single-player games when the industry over the last few months or years has been saying, "Oh, story-driven games are falling by the wayside, and everything's going to a games as a service model," and so it's really kind of reassuring to see these games up there. That's not to say that they made a lot of money. I don't know. A lot of these games didn't really appeal to me. Sekiro was a Souls-ish game, and that's just not my style.
Yeah, I heard nothing but good things about it.
It looks beautiful.
Yeah.
I would like to play it.
I also have not played it, but it just I haven't heard anything bad about it.
Right. The Outer Worlds is good. I did a live stream the other day for a couple hours, and I really enjoyed it. So that's going to be a game I get back to because it is a game that's also shorter. Control, I've heard good things, but sales numbers, not so much. Death Stranding had its fair share of news recently.
I think Death Stranding is going to win because the fan base who like really dedicated to that game, that dedicated themselves to that game, went just all in on it, you know, on some of the ridiculousness about it. And I'm not knocking the game. I have not played it. My hopes were a little dashed once the game came out, but I still do want to play it. So I'm not going to put any opinions in it further than that. But some of the people went to incredible lengths to say some of the bad things about it are actually good things.
People were very defensive of
my
that game.
one example, and I won't pull out any specific posts or anything like that, but my one example is that somebody said video games do not need to be fun, and that's why Death Stranding is going to be one of the best games, because video games don't need to be fun. They can be this and they can be that, and yeah, you know what? They can be all of these things. But like, that's the same as saying like music doesn't need to be good. It can be, it can be emotional and it can be well written, but all in the end that all makes it good, you know, putting good gameplay and making a well-built game makes the game good. It makes the game fun. If you're not, I just can't imagine playing it otherwise, unless you're playing like a game specifically made for like brain training or something like that. Like, oh, this isn't fun, but I'm not meant to have fun. But you can't tell me Death Stranding wasn't made for people to have fun.
Well, I'm trying to think of a game that like I enjoyed maybe the aesthetics and the controls, but like didn't like the story. I'm sure there are games that I've
But did you continue playing it is the point. Was it supposed to be fun?
Yeah. And maybe that's just a subconscious, that's why I never finish a lot of games, is because ultimately they don't hold me long enough to want to finish.
Yeah.
Which to me is a sign of a really
have.
good game. Like I like a lot of games and a lot of Nintendo games, but I was going through my travel bag for Switch, and I'm like, well, I got to take some games out that I don't play anymore. And once they're in the case on the shelf, very rarely do I go get them again.
Mm-hmm.
And I just added the Toad puzzle game, which I played on Wii U, so that's kind of a cheat. And Pokemon Let's Go, which I never finished, and I don't plan on finishing it. But it doesn't mean it's a bad game. So I don't know.
But the point of the game is to have fun, right? Like, it's not whether you had fun, it's whether the point of the game was to have fun. My whole point in this entire topic was the fact that people were trying to justify the fact that the game might not be fun. And to me, that just seemed silly. So I was just going off on a silly tangent saying that the people who were really all in on this game were probably going to go so hard on this and say it is the greatest game ever, that they're just going to love it so much that they'll skyrocket it to the top over everybody else because they're just going to be that crazy rabid fan base.
Maybe.
That's all.
I don't know. We'll see.
This was a silly tangent.
I think the Game Awards themselves have done a great job of getting more and more recognition every year.
They have, and I really like I wish I remembered his name, but I like the guy who hosts it.
Jeff Knightley.
Yeah. He does a really good job. I appreciate him.
He does, and he built that from the ground up, which I think is awesome. If you ever get a chance to read his story, it's really, really interesting.
Yeah. He's
the
great.
The only thing I don't like about him is that he spells his name Geoff. But
well, he lost me there.
No. He really is. He seems to be like a genuinely really wonderful person.
He does a good job at not holding the spotlight. Like, this isn't about me.
He knows it's not about him.
Yeah, as much as it's something that he did and he built, like, this is for you guys. This is about the gamers and the developers. So let me talk and do my spiel, and then he passes it off to the people who are really, actually running the whole thing. You'd almost have no idea that he's like the person who built it up.
Right. You would just think he's the MC.
Yeah,
which I think is cool.
From what I've seen at the Game Awards, like, I don't know his backstory or anything about him, but I genuinely like him as far as that goes, and I think he does a really good job with it.
Well, I try and watch them. I was streaming a bit of it last year because I don't know if it's on regular television. But it's just a really cool event where just gamers celebrate games. Like, I don't know, having not played some of these, Like I wouldn't care if one of those games won and I never played it. Like I just think it's cool that it's winning recognition of something, which I think is awesome. Nintendo kind of represented with some good titles this year, actually. A lot of different categories for the Game Awards. I'm not going to go through every category, but I wanted to pick out the Nintendo highlights, as that tends to be our focus. Astral Chain is up for Action Game of the Year, which I don't know what it's up against, but having played Astral Chain and really enjoying it, I think it's a strong contender to win that category because the action mechanics are so unique and just rewarding and fun and awesome. So I always cross my fingers for the Nintendo win because I think it needs to get repped, especially in categories like this, because the one category they dominate in, but I think that puts them in a bad light. Link's Awakening is up for Action Adventure Game of the Year and for Art Direction.
Got my vote.
I don't think it's going to win either of those.
Probably
Smash
not, but
Brothers
it's got my vote.
is also up for, in addition to Game of the Year, Best Fighting Game.
I wonder what that's up against because it
I think
might
the
stand
only
a chance.
contender I think it has is Mortal Kombat 11.
So it's up against Dead or Alive 6, which I cannot see when I'm not going to lie. I'm
couldn't.
actually surprised it's nominated. I haven't heard anything about Dead or Alive in years. So I actually just threw out a Dead or Alive game the other day for PS2.
Was it Dead or Alive 3 Extreme Beach Volleyball?
Believe it or not, that was one of them because someone gave it to me and would not take it back.
I'll take it.
I
I'm going to mail it to my friend.
I wonder if it's still in the trash. You can have it. Jump Force, which I haven't heard of.
Oh, yeah,
that.
it kind of came and went. So I think Mortal Kombat's the only one from
Mortal
a
Kombat
fan
11
base and sales standpoint.
And
has some-
Samurai Showdown, which just from the title doesn't surprise me that it's made by SNK.
Yeah.
But
So I think it's got a chance there. Tetris 99 appeared in Best Multiplayer Games, which I don't think it has. It was the only puzzle game there. I think everything else was.
yeah, I can't see that winning.
different
It's up
category.
against Apex Legends, which will probably win.
No, Apex fan base dropped off a lot, so we'll see.
It's still pretty big though. So actually no, it's probably not going to win because there's Borderlands 3, which I don't think is going to win either. It's just a different kind of game, and it got a lot of bad press. As good of a game as it is, and my opinions notwithstanding, it got a lot of bad press, and it's still getting bad press. Call of Duty Modern Warfare is probably just going to win it because it's Call of Duty. Then there's Tetris, and then there's Tom Clancy's The Division 2, which oddly enough, I haven't heard anything good or bad since the game came out, and I think that might be a good thing.
When I traded in my Xbox to buy a new Xbox. It came with it, and I played it like for the first few days, and then I kind of fell off of it because of it's always needed to be online. It was actually a pain in the butt to get back into. But I think Tetris is a weird outlier there. I'd be very surprised. I think it'd be cool as hell if it won.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then strategy game Fire Emblem Three Houses, which potentially. But there is a category that's dedicated to best family game, which I think is the Game Awards way of acknowledging that most of the games that are being highlighted are games that are rated M for mature audiences, 17 and older. And so as a kind of a way to like we work in a high school. I know there are 14-year-olds that are playing these games that arguably they can not walk into a store and buy. There's a family category, which is all Nintendo games.
Wow. Yeah, it is.
Luigi's Mansion 3, Ring Fit Adventure, which we made fun of pretty heavily. Super Mario
and
Maker 2.
then ended up getting good reviews.
Yeah. Super Mario Maker 2, Super Smash Brothers, and Yoshi's Crafted World.
Okay, quick prediction on this one. What do you think?
Well, Super Smash Brothers in there, it could just because it's popularity, but if I had to pick, I would go with Luigi's Mansion 3.
If you're taking Luigi's Mansion, I'll take Ring Fit. Because I was up between those two.
Really?
So, yeah, I think it's going to be one of those two.
All right, well then you know
but
what?
my predictions are always wrong, so it won't be that.
I think it's such an untraditional game or non-traditional game that makes it unique, but I don't know if that makes it the best. Interesting.
Fair.
All right, well, we'll place some bets then and see which one comes out on top. And when it's Yoshi's Crafted World, we'll both give Joe $100.
I like that.
I mean, Kevin $100. Damn it, I said it wrong.
No, you already said it.
No.
You heard it. You all heard it.
I think that category is kind of cool, but like I just feel like it just puts Nintendo games back in that kiddie category, and I don't think that's fair, but that's okay. All right, we did Pokemon sales numbers, which was awesome. We're gonna have to cut some stuff, Joe. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
Joe wanted to spend some time talking about Stadia and xCloud and PlayStation Now, all of which have come up with Stadia's release. as being service platforms. We'll save that for the next podcast.
Yeah, you know what? Come back on the next podcast because we'll have time to talk about that, and maybe we'll have more insight in general. We'll have more beta insight into xCloud and its preview, and more insight into Stadia once it has been out for a few more weeks and has some reviews out.
Plus, we can talk about those Game of the Award winners and see how we feel about that, as well as talk about some holiday stuff. Yeah, the next episode, we're going to be doing some Game of the Year chat as well, and it might end up turning into a fight between what games we think are the games that deserve to be at the top of that list.
And I'll lose all of them, so.
That's not true. Really quick, Joe, are you playing anything new?
Anything new? No.
Anything that's not Borderlands or Metal Gear Solid 5?
Okay, I haven't picked up Metal Gear Solid since Borderlands
I'm just saying, I know
out.
that's been perpetually in our rundown.
I think last time I had just started playing Goose Game, Untitled Goose Game, and I'd put a little bit more time into it, but it's one of those games that like you can put down and come back to way later because it's very casual. It gives you a list of the things that you need to do and kind of puts you back outside of the area that you were just in.
But I also heard it's a game you can beat in 3 hours, so...
Yes, but only if you're smarter than me. I'm generally pretty good at puzzle games, but there's been a couple points where I've gone, I don't exactly know how to do this.
Okay.
And there's a lot of waiting. Like there's a lot of like, all right, let me just stand here
and wait for the guy to walk by. Okay. Yeah.
Let me wait for him to put that foot up so I can take the slipper off. Now let him put that foot up so I can take the slipper off. So it's kind of like that. But it's a very easy game to jump in and out of. But I haven't touched in a couple weeks. But you lent me Pokemon, and I put a couple hours into Pokemon. I'm probably going to give it back soon because it's a fun game and it's just not drawing me. It's not in there. It's in my Switch. Super Smash is in there.
Oh,
it's holding my
have
copy
that.
of Super Smash.
Okay.
So, but I'm probably gonna go back, fill in some time in Borderlands. But I think the very next game. No, I honestly think the very next game that I'm gonna play is called Convincing Tom to Lend Me Luigi's Mansion.
Okay, well that's on my list, and I'm in the arduous position of trying to realistically juggle a lot of these games. I went from Link's Awakening to Dragon Quest to Pokemon, and I have Ni no Kuni sitting at home, and I don't know if I can do another 40-hour like RPG type game. And so Luigi's Mansion was this wonderful palate cleanser and a really fun game to play, and I'm hoping it just doesn't get forgotten. Because I played it hardcore that week of Halloween, and as soon as Halloween was over, I'm kind of like, I'm done with the spooky stuff. And so I got about halfway through, and the floors get way intricate as you move towards the top, which I really liked. But it did kind of toy with my anxiety a little bit because there's like all these money and coins that come out of things that don't have a lot of value. Like you can buy stuff, but that stuff really isn't, like you don't need it. And so my obsessive compulsive need to make sure I got every dollar that fell out of the chandelier as it like realistically flipped and slowly went to the ground was a bit much. Like I just basically walked through that game with the shoulder button pressed down the whole time. But it's really charming. It's really fun. I'm going to get back into that. But I've been putting most of my time into, Pokemon the past weekend, but Dragon Quest XI. And so in reference to what I said earlier about just falling off games because I lose interest, this is a game where I've just crossed the 40-hour mark, and I really want to see it through to the end. Not because I put in that time and I want it to be worth something, but like I'm really invested in this cast of characters that are voice acted and really great, and I've just been really enjoying that. So I finally got over the hump. I mentioned this to Joe the other day, as it happens in most JRPGs, is that you will come across a boss that's not quite the final boss, but like near the end of the story that is way harder than the final boss, and you get over that hump, and then you get to the final boss, and you're like, oh, that other boss was way more hard.
See every save file for every Final Fantasy game that I own.
Yeah, right? So I finally, like, while watching some Star Wars movies the other night, just said, all right, well, I'm going to grind a little bit in this field because I can kind of do it passively while I'm watching the movie, and then I just went full steam in, and I took him down in, like, as it happens, right, like 2 seconds, that fight was over, and I'm like, sweet. So I'm happy to keep pressing on with that because that story just keeps getting better and better. So yeah, that's going to be definitely one of my top 5 for the year, I'm sure. So lots of good stuff that we're playing. I didn't want to ignore our listener questions to the 2 gentlemen who, I'm presuming gentlemen. That was really bad of me. I should not say that. Well, one I know because we've chatted through some of our live streams. Good friend of the show, Stardust Speedway, writes in from all the way across the country. and wants to know very simply how we met and how long have you been friends? And I can probably answer that question with, how long have we worked here, Joe?
I'm just going to hit 5 years in a month.
Okay, and I'm just hitting 8. So I met Joe
Roughly 4 years ago.
working here my first summer because I do summer work with the tech department.
Which is
Joe's
me.
farm. I work for Joe.
Just for 2 months, though.
Yes, and then we had just a lot in common. I caught Joe, one of my favorite Joe memories. Little sappy love story here.
Oh, I'm excited for this. No, I'm not.
We were doing something over the summer. I think we were actually in the auditorium fixing something behind the stage, and you like hummed 2 bars of a song, and I went, "Is that a Millencolin song?" And you gave me this look like you never would have thought those words would have left my mouth, and I'm like, you were like, "Yes," and I'm like, "Cool, you're a cool dude." But no, we all met each other here at work. Kevin most recently because he's the newest to the building. But Mike and Joe work in the tech department. Ada, Kevin, and I are all teachers. So I met Ada in my first year because I took on an advisor position. So she and I were advisors of the class, and that's how we got to know each other. We've been doing that ever since. And we all love games. So we all end up talking about games and stuff, which is cool.
It was one of those things where we're all close enough in age and have enough in common and just get along well enough that it was easy for us to say, like, it was easy for us to start our conversations, and they snowballed very quickly.
Yes.
You know, like, hey, you're the one person around that I can talk to about this, so we're going to talk about this.
Right.
And then, you know, Kevin joined in on that, and Kevin has a lot more to say than you'd think.
He really does. And I looked at the camera dramatically for that. He really does.
He can just, occasionally, he'll just go, which I don't want Kevin to watch this and think that I'm complaining. Like,
no.
Because it's great because I don't have a whole lot of friends and a whole lot of people around that I can hold a full conversation about video games and complain about a video game about, and you know, I can say something and Kevin will just go off about it, about how, you know, how we're right or how we're wrong, or just how it's related to things. Like, it's cool to have that friend, or, you know, that group of friends that you guys can just sit and we can have this entire conversation without these cameras and microphones.
Oh yeah, no, this would be happening over Wonder Sub or lunch or
in
something.
smaller stints, you know,
yeah,
not sitting
course,
here like this, but like all this would happen naturally anyway.
Right. So yeah, it was the perfect storm of all of us getting to know and meet each other and falling in love. T. Elting writes in and asks Pokemon related question, but who is your favorite starter and what will your full Pokemon team look like? I can't speak for the team as it's changed every new Pokemon I get. I've been enjoying them enough to go, oh, let's throw you in there. So I have some weird bear looking guy that's like pink and brown and he just kind of looks all wubby. And I like him because he's strong. But I don't know. I picked Scorbunny and I typically, like I said, go with fire. So
I'm the same way. I took.
I did want Wobble or Sobble because he looked kind of sad and cute, but the evolutions just ruined it for me.
Form,
it's really bad.
My explanation of his
looks
last
like
form.
Squidward.
See, my explanation of his last form was what Gex the Gecko would look like if they redid that game now.
And he was a pompous jackass.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't know what my team will look like either, because honestly, I don't know all of the Pokemon that came in the Galar decks. Because,
neither do I.
well, I thought there would be a lot because, I mean, there was 150 in the first gen and 150 in the second gen, and then there's like 80 or 70 or 80 in this gen. So I'm not sure who everybody is, and everybody's kind of new to me because I don't have the time to stay as invested in Pokemon as I used to. So the whole game is different to me now. But I mean, I tend to try and vary up my team so that I've got an element from everything that I can. So I'm always prepared.
So I'm excited to get rid of that weird looking turtle guy because he's my only water
with
type.
The big head.
He kind of looks like the turtle. I know this is a very vague reference or specific reference. The turtle from Family Guy that fights Stewie in that one episode where he's just like obnoxiously smug. I don't know how to explain it. I'll send you a picture and you'll go
Please do.
oh my God, it's spot on. So I apologize out there if we didn't quite catch that reference.
I will. I'm probably gonna keep Nickit or whatever his evolved form is, the fox, because I like foxes. Pretty. I'll keep Yamper because that way I've got my electric, my normal, and my fire type right there. But overall, it's really what appeals to me and what grows with me as I go. What really fills out the need for elemental types and everything.
Right.
And that's probably everybody's kind of spiel with their Pokemon, but it's a mixture of that and like if there's two normal types, it's is it
get rid of one and throw something else in there. Unless you're that guy that had a level 100 Wooloo and was able to make it through the game.
I'm happy for him.
I am too. I'm happy for Wooloo. Because he's a cute little fluffy
true.
Pokemon dude.
There was, my God, the uprising that came around when they announced him. Like, I want this Wooloo forever.
Yeah,
and then he's like in the start of the game and they're everywhere. And it's just, catering to everyone, which is
it's
fine.
so fluffy.
It
From Despicable
really
Me.
was.
You just wanted to cuddle up with a Wooloo. Maybe knit yourself a scarf with its wool. Or eat it. Apparently you do that now. Anyway, that's going to be our show. We'll end on that, eating Pokemon, because that's a whole separate conversation that I don't have any interest in. But people have had, so they're out there.
That's for the Black and White series, when Pokemon Black and White came out, because it was all about morality.
Oh, okay, nope,
So
nope, not
we're a
going
couple
there.
of
We're going to
generations
end
too late for that.
on a lighthearted note. So I want to thank Stardust Speedway and T. Elting for
Yes,
taking
thank
the
you.
time to write in, and they've written in before, and I really appreciate, we appreciate their viewership and their time in checking us out and staying with us, because that is something special to us, and we appreciate that.
I
So-
really like viewer questions. I like to be able to make sure
yeah,
we're connecting with people.
and
that
I tried
we're
to get them
answering the
out
things they
early
wanna
this
hear.
time, so it wasn't like, oh shoot, the day before, because well, I know we don't draw a lot of traffic, but the traffic we do draw, we're happy to have you there, and I think that's wonderful. So thank you, folks, for taking the time to write in. Don't hesitate to go, oh, I wrote in last time, I'm not going to do it again. No, keep doing it.
No, please. It doesn't matter who's writing. It's the content of the questions.
Yeah,
We want to make sure we talk
absolutely.
to everybody. So
And
submit as many questions, and we'll eventually get them all
Yeah,
answered.
even Stardust, I was like, well, I don't want to ask this question without Kevin here, but I was like, you know what? We're going to answer that question without Kevin here. And I think we did okay. So thank you for watching and listening. That's going to be episode 5 of the Level 30 podcast. And we hope you enjoyed. We hope you check out Level 6. We're going to wrap up the year in December, talking about some Game of the Year stuff and maybe what we're looking forward to in 2020 and how that whole year is going to shape up with some new consoles and Switch Pro maybe. And maybe we start January with a Direct, and we'll have a really awesome topic of conversation for the 7th episode of the Level 30 podcast, because we want to see this through for as long as we can continue to find time to sit and chat to each other and with you about video games and the things we enjoy doing. So thank you. Check us out on YouTube with our videos and reviews and previews and Let's Plays. And man, we got a little bit of everything on there. So watch that, subscribe that, like that, give us some feedback, and we'll see you next time. Bye.